Hi, I'm Bean. I recently started streaming on Twitch, and when I did, I started playing some Skyrim again. And after doing this, I kind of realized that a lot of people don't really know the lore behind the Elder Scrolls universe. And some people who are looking to jump into playing Skyrim kind of want to have a little bit of background before they start playing. So I thought I'd try and take on the task of just describing the Elder Scrolls lore, describing what the universe is like, describe it because it's fully fleshed out. It's a fully fleshed out universe on its own, which is why this will probably be a multiple part series because I couldn't possibly fit all of the lore into one video. I hope you enjoy. I'll leave the link to my Twitch channel in the description. You can go and have a look. I'll probably be playing Skyrim at some point soon, and yeah, I hope you enjoy. So an important question to answer, I think, about the Elder Scrolls universe, first of all, is where does it take place? The Elder Scrolls, in short, takes place on a planet called Nirn. Nirn, along with 2 moons and a number of other planets, make up the realm of existence that is known as Mundus. Mundus is surrounded by the plane of Oblivion, and Oblivion is then surrounded by the plane of Aetherius. Mundus is a constructed mortal realm created by Lorkhan and the Atada. We'll get to these in a minute, but they're essentially like divine beings in the Dawn era, before time existed in the linear way that we think about it now. Okay, so as I mentioned, Nirn is not alone in Mundus. Nirn has 2 moons. These are called Secunda and Massa. Massa is the larger of the 2, and Massa revolves around Nirn. And Secunda, actually, we learned later, revolves around Massa rather than Nirn itself. Mundus is also home to the Aedric planets, and these are planets that are named after the beings that put the most into the creation of Mundus. These planets are called Akatosh, Arcade, Dibella, Julianos, Kinnereth, Mara, Zenithar, and Stendarr. The sun in the Elder Scrolls universe was created when an Atada called Magnus ripped a hole through Oblivion on his way to Aetherius as he was escaping the creation of Mundus. Those who followed, now known as the Magna Gi, ripped holes in Oblivion also, but these were smaller holes, and so these created the stars. Oblivion is home to the Daedric princes, and these are the Atada who wanted nothing to do with the creation of Mundus, and Oblivion is thought to be a really dark place. Almost all of the realms of Oblivion are actually ruled over by the Daedric princes themselves. A few examples of these realms are Hermaeus Mora's Apocrypha, which you can actually visit in the Dragonborn DLC of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, Nocturnal's Evergloam, and the Soulcairn. Now, the Soulcairn is one of the very few realms that the Daedric princes actually don't rule over the Soulcairn. The Soulcairn is instead ruled over by beings that refer to themselves as the Ideal Masters. Oblivion is thought to be a opposite to Aetherius, as Aetherius is thought to be a kind of an afterlife in this Elder Scrolls universe. Aetherius is the realm from which the Aedra originate. It's also where all of the magicka in the universe comes from. And most people believe that once you die in the Elder Scrolls universe, as I mentioned, you are going to spend the rest of time in Aetherius. While it is known that there are many planes of Aetherius, not many of the names of these planes are actually known to mortals, but there are 4 that are known, and these are the Mantellan Crux, the Sands Behind the Stars, the Far Shores, and the one that you may visit during the main quest line of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, Sovngarde. Now, allow me to complicate this for a second. All of this, Mundus, Oblivion, and Aetherius, is part of what is called Arbis, and Arbis is the name for the universe. Also within Arbis is a space called the Void. The Void is a cosmic realm of utter nothingness that is the domain of Sithis, and also is where the Daedric princes and the plane of Oblivion came from. All of these planes of existence, or non-existence in the Void's case, is the overlap of 2 cosmic forces, Anu and Padme. Anu is thought of as the force of order, while Padme is thought of as the force of chaos. Again, I will delve into this at some point later in the video. But for the moment, that's enough discussion of the planes of the universe. I think now we'll have a look at the actual planet, Nirn. Nirn is said to have an almost non-existent tilt because the days during the year do not fluctuate whatsoever, and the weather doesn't change within the regions at all. So each region will have consistent weather. On the planet Nirn, there is a notably large continent called Tamriel, and this is where all of the Elder Scrolls games are based. Tamriel is split into 9 provinces. These are Blackmarsh, Cyrodiil, Valenwood, High Rock, the Somerset Isles, Elsweyr, Hammerfell, Morrowind, and Skyrim. First, I'll briefly explain who resides in each of these provinces. Blackmarsh is like a swampy rainforest, and this is home to the Argonians. Cyrodiil has been capital province for 3 human empires in Tamriel, which means that most of the population is a mix of humans and elves. Valenwood in the south is home to the Bosna, or the Wood Elves, and is made up mostly of uninhabited forests. High Rock is populated mostly by Bretons, who are descendants of both humans and elves. The Somerset Isles is made up of 3 different islands and is where you can find the Altmer, who are otherwise known as the High Elves. Elsweyr is the home of the Khajiit, the lovable feline characters that you can play in the Elder Scrolls game. When the Elder Scrolls V takes place, Elsweyr has actually split into 2 nations because of a coup against the Empire. Hammerfell is home of the Redguards. Now, the Redguards originally lived on Yakunda, which we will talk about later, but when that collapsed, they fled to Hammerfell. Morrowind used to house the Dwemer, the dwarven race, and also the Chimer, the ascendants of the Dunmer, who are the Dark Elves. After the disappearance of the Dwemer, Morrowind became home to the Dunmer. Lastly, Skyrim is home to the Proud Nords, a race of hardy humans with an affinity for cold temperatures. However, they weren't the original inhabitants of Skyrim. Skyrim was originally inhabited by snow elves, and there's actually only 1 left now. The rest have been driven to a state of almost being animal-like and are now known as the Falmer. Now, I've given you a brief description of what Tamriel looks like, but Tamriel isn't actually the only continent on Nirn. To the east of Tamriel is a continent known as Akavir, which means Dragonland, and these 2 landmasses are separated by the Padomaic Ocean. To the north of Tamriel is a landmass called Atmora. To the west of Tamriel lies Yakunda, which mysteriously sank into the ocean, and the cause of which is still unknown to this day. Located far south of the Somerset Isles is Pyandania, which is a rainforest-like location home to the elusive Malmer, otherwise known as the Tropical Elves. They migrated from Aldmeris. Almost nothing is known about Aldmeris, including whether it still exists, but is said to be home to both elven and mankind. The last of the landmasses on Nirn is called Thras, and much like the others, very little is known about this, just that it is located in the Sea of Pearls. As I mentioned before, Mundus was created by Lorkhan and the other Retarder, but before I discuss that, I must first discuss how the Arbis came to be. Before the creation of Arbis was known as the pre-universe, which was just utter nothingness. From this, the twin forces of order and chaos were born, and they were named Anu and Padme. Now, each of these chose to create their own souls because they didn't have one. These souls that were born were called Anuiel, born from Anu, and Sithis, born from Padme. The interactions between Anu and Padme is what created the Arbis. After this, other beings started forming from the void, including Auriel, also known as Akatosh, and he is actually the birthed soul of Anuiel. Auriel was the being responsible for bringing the concept of time into the universe, so it wasn't up until this point that time existed. Because he introduced this concept of time, other beings were allowed to form and create their own individualities. and this led to hundreds of divine beings being created. Lorkhan was also a being that was birthed from the void, alongside Auriel, and Lorkhan was actually the birthed soul of Sithis, who was the birthed soul of Padme. If you remember, right at the beginning we discussed Lorkhan as being the divine being that conceptualized the creation of Mundus. So just to summarize, up until this point in the story, Oblivion, the Void, and Aetherius all exist, but Mundus doesn't. The creation of Mundus is actually a fascinating bit of lore. It's really interesting to research, at least for me. It was created by a multitude of the Atada, but it was conceptualized by Lorkhan, as I said, who then went to the other Atada and asked them for assistance in the creation of this universe, as it would require a lot of power. Now, these beings wanted to create a mortal realm because all they knew was immortality, and they wanted some way to experience being mortal. The most important of the Atada to the creation of Mundus is someone I mentioned before, Magnus, who actually was responsible for drawing up the plans for the plane of existence. Those of the Atada that gave the most of themselves to the creation of Mundus became the planets that surround Nirn, also known as the 8 Divines, which were the 8 planets that I listed earlier. Those of the Aedra, however, that gave themselves fully to the creation of Mundus became what are known as Earthbones. These Earthbones are essentially the life forces of the mortal realm. Of course, as I mentioned, those Atada that had no interest in the creation of Mundus went straight to Oblivion and were later named the Daedric Princes. All was going well until Magnus saw the planets that were being created around Nirn in Mundus of the Aedra, and he became disgusted at what had become of the other Aedra, and so he then fled to Aetherius, ripping a hole in Oblivion, as I mentioned, creating the sun. Those that followed him, as I said, the Magna Gi, ripped holes in Oblivion too, and those became the stars. Now, different races and cultures have different versions of and different ideas of what happened during all this. Some believe that Lorkhan actually tricked the other Aedra into creating Mundus, and that it wasn't voluntary at all. They didn't realize that their power would be stripped, while other cultures believe that the Aedra knew what was going to happen to them, but they were fully invested in the creation of Mundus. After Magnus and the Magna Gi fled to Aetherius, an event called the Convention was held, which was essentially a meeting called by Akatosh outside of Arbus time that would discuss the punishment that Lorkhan would receive for tricking the other Aedra into creating Mundus. The tower that this convention took place in actually still exists in the 4th era and is most likely the oldest structure on Tamriel. The spark notes of this convention is that they decided to separate Lorkhan from his divine heart. The way that this was done was Trinomac, known as the Knight or Auriel, ripped his heart out, and Auriel tied it to an arrow and shot it into the sea, which is how the Red Mountain was actually formed. The heart of Lorkhan actually gave some stability to the mortal realm and allowed the Aedra to leave without the whole thing falling apart. So up until now, I think I've done a pretty good job of explaining the setting and the very beginning of the Elder Scrolls universe. From here, I have to explain that time within the Elder Scrolls universe is split into different eras. These are the Dawn era, the Merithic era, and then the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th eras. Now these are actually all separated by a specific event. No real sense of actual linear time existed in the Dawn era, as this is when Mundus was created, and this era ended with the Convention. The Merithic era was mainly dominated by the elves making their way to Tamriel, but many beast folk or Betma, and these are progenitors of the Khajiit and the Argonians and other beast races. They also lived in communities during this time too. It wasn't just the elves. Little is known about the Betma, which is why not a lot is known about how long they were on Tamriel Tamriel before the elves arrived. During this time as well, the Aldmer, who are the ascendants of Elvenkind, settled the Somerset Isles and also parts of Tamriel. The Aldmer believed that they were created from the Aedra that were actually left on Mundus after Lorkhan was destroyed, and they also believed that they came from the continent called Aldmerion. This is actually refuted by some people and claimed to be a pure myth. As the Aldmer spread throughout Tamriel, they actually evolved into many different species of elves, as I've mentioned before. The first settled in Valenwood and became the Bosna, or the Wood Elves. The Snow Elves appeared in Skyrim, and the Dwemer appeared in Morrowind. The elves who chose to remain in the Somerset Isles became the Altmer. Even the Orcs in Skyrim actually once were elves. This happened to a group of Aldmer who worshipped Trinomac, the Atada we mentioned before, and they were ultimately transformed into orcs when another Atada named Boethia actually ate Trinomac and he became Malakath, and when this happened, the elves that worshipped Trinomac became orcs. I'm kind of thinking we might have to look at that little bit in another video. Also, during this time, during the Merithic era, was the migration of the Nords from Atmora to Tamriel, which is mostly attributed to the freezing temperatures on Atmora. They were becoming increasingly cold, so bad that they couldn't stand it. The end of the Merithic era was actually marked by the Cameron dynasty by Eplir, who was a Bosmer king, and it's considered one of the greatest military feats in all of Tamriel. This also could in itself be a whole other video. This then marked the beginning of the First Era, which is the first time that time begins to be tracked properly, if that makes sense. I think the beginning of the First Era is a good place to wrap up this video. Please bear in mind that almost every topic that I just brushed on today could have its own video. That's how extensive this lore is, so I'm really trying my best to try and compile it, compact it, and make it easy to understand for people who haven't really had much experience with the game. If you have any questions in the comments, let me know, and that might be what I base some videos on, but I'll just try and answer as many questions as I can. I'll most likely make this quite a long series on just the event in the Elder Scrolls universe, as long as you liked listening to my recount of it. If you did, yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe and all that stuff. Also, if you're interested in actually like watching me play this game, I do play it quite a lot on my Twitch channel, which I will leave a link to in the description. Yeah, thank you for watching, and yeah, Bean out.